Hello, everybody. I'm Lukas here with my co-host Charlie Vignola, and we are welcoming our special guest, Ashley Scott Meyers from sellingyourscreenplay.com. He's also a filmmaker, and the good news is he's like 40 times more experienced at podcasts than we are. So He'll just take over. He's got the radio voice and the radio energy. And I wanted to say that we met because one of the things that Ashley has is an email blast to thousands of people in the industry, and it's part of the services. And I approached him maybe a year and a half ago. I have a sci-fi short film, and I was begging in a very backdoor way, like, hey, will you check out my sci-fi short, hoping maybe I could get a free blast. And he was so cool and was very complimentary and did give me a blast. And I did meet some interesting people. And then that's sort of how we met. And then he very kindly gave me another blast for a different project last week. And I say, hey, come on our show because you know a lot of stuff, and we'll cross promote. And so welcome. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. So
wow, Ashley, you do have that DJ radio voice.
I really don't. You guys are being very kind.
That mellifluous voice. Okay, cool.
You got the energy though.
Well, we do what we can.
It's funny. My kid's second grade teacher was just a contestant on a game show. She won 25 grand on Do You Know the Lyrics or whatever that show is on Fox.
Wow.
And she was like a great guest contestant for this. And I'm like, wow. So teaching second grade and being on national television is pretty much the same energy level.
Wow.
But she's awesome, and we're very happy for her.
Yeah, that is awesome.
All right, so here's how cool Ashley is. I started when I first got on saying that, Charlie, you and I a few weeks ago interviewed a writer named Isabel Drian.
Yep.
And she was super cool. And recently on one of the Facebook groups, she was upset because she got feedback from Ashley's contest that she felt like the writer it wasn't just that it was negative to her script, it just seemed like an inexperienced reader, and she was unhappy. And I said, dude, I don't want to ambush you, but can I ask you? And Ashley was like, please. So what's your answer to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't actually looked at the feedback. I will definitely go back and have a look at it. But, I've tried to design this contest. And one of the things doing my own podcast over the years, I've interviewed most of the folks who run these contests, run these script fests. And, one of the things that I definitely noticed about most of these guys, if not all of these guys, is that, we all realize that at the end of the day, the best thing we can do for our contest is, find good scripts and get them produced, because that just is a feedback loop to bring people back to our contest if people are seeing movies get produced. So when I designed this contest and started out, literally my thinking process is, how can I create a system where a whole bunch of scripts, hundreds, thousands of scripts get dumped in at the top, and then somehow they get filtered in at the bottom, and we get the best scripts, or presumably at least some good scripts at the bottom that have gone through this filtration process. So that really was how I tried to design this thing. Is it going to be perfect? Is there always going to be some people that are a little upset or don't like the feedback? Of course. But our system, the way I designed the system was, every script that gets entered into the contest gets at least 2 reads. So we've got 2 readers that are going to read the script and do the assessment. And I do allow the writers to buy those assessments for an extra $10. You can get to both of these assessments. Now, the way the assessments are set up is the reader, they write a little bit on the script, but they also just evaluate it, and they use, pass, consider, recommend, which are sort of the industry standard ways of reviewing a script. So that's sort of what I decided on. So if a screenplay gets a consider or a recommend from one of the first 2 readers, so you got 2 chances to impress one of the first 2 readers. If it gets a consider or a recommend from one of the first 2 readers, it then gets a 3rd read, and that then 3rd reader will do the same evaluation, same assessment. So then the writer actually gets 3 assessments for the same price. If we happen to do the 3rd assessment, we'll send them the 3rd assessment. But the bottom line is, we're reviewing a lot of scripts. I have a very clear standard that I try and, show and teach all of these readers to abide by. And is everybody happy with the feedback? No, of course not. Writers are not going to be always happy with it. But legitimately, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find the best scripts that we can then get to producers and get produced. And I have made my contest, it's literally called the 6-figure screenplay contest, because it's low budget. The whole idea of the contest is that these screenplays could be produced produce for 6 figures or, six figures or less, maybe even 5 figures. And, I think the proof is in the pudding, frankly. We've been around, this was our 3rd year. We're literally just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago, our 3rd season. And, we've gotten a script produced. For the winning script from our first contest actually did get produced. And that screenwriter has actually gone on to have a pretty good career and has a number of projects.
What was the film?
It's called Killer Profile. It ended up being a kind of a lifetime, one of these mystery thriller. It was produced by Mar Vista, and ended up showing, I think, on the Lifetime channel or Hallmark channel, one of those. It was sort of a TV type thriller movie, again, made for well less than $1 million, which was the purpose of the contest. I interviewed the screenwriter, so I can't remember what episode number it was, but we can definitely get that if your listeners have any interest in listening. I interviewed him, and he kind of tells his story about things. And I also interviewed the industry judge. There's a fellow named Ted Campbell, and he was one of my industry judges for the contest. He was reading some scripts, and that's the other piece of this, is that once we vet these scripts with those initial 3 reads from the paid readers, then I have sort of a bunch of industry judges. And really, the industry judges are people that are, for the most part, producers looking for low budget scripts to produce. There are people that I know or have contacted with, and so I just reached out to them. And over the years, we've had dozens of these producers. So they come on, and they tell me what kind of projects they're looking for, comedy, drama, or whatever. And so then as these scripts start to bubble to the top, I then start pitching these scripts with a log line. Hey, we just had a reader, this is what they said. They really like this script. Do you want to read it? And then these industry judges start to take a look at it. And in this case, Ted liked the script. I put him in touch with this fellow named Richard Pierce, who is the writer, and he optioned the script. He took it to Mar Vista. He had a connection over there, and they ended up producing the movie. And I know there's been at least one option, and I think there's been a couple of other options from last year. So we're still hopeful that our second season will end up having some produced credits as well. So I do feel like, just overall, the system that we've built is working. It is functioning as designed. I mean, does that mean every single read and every single assessment is A++ and 100% things? Of course not. But that's why I'm trying to get more than one read. It doesn't rely on one read.
Ashley,
these are a little tired.
Can Charlie ask?
Could I ask you real quickly, Ashley?
Yeah.
Like how many readers, when you run one of these contests, how many readers are you working with to filter through the entries?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to depend on the number of scripts. Let's say we get 350 entries, 350 entries in our contest. I think we probably use about 20 readers, 25 readers.
How do you find them?
And it expands or contracts when you get the entries coming in?
I mean, it just, I've gotten a little better at it. I mean, so the first year, I had to expand and contract a couple of times because I just didn't really know how it would go. Last year, I got a little better. This year, I kind of was able to time things a little better and just make things a little smoother. Because, for the most part, I mean, just as a practical matter, you get the bulk of your entries when you have these deadlines. So there's the early bird deadline. So, there's weeks where we don't get a lot of entries and then we get a whole bunch of entries. So there is some contraction. This year, though, frankly, I didn't really have to do a lot of hiring in the middle of the season. I pretty much had all my readers at the beginning of the season, and then we got.
Where are they coming from? Where the readers that you're hiring when it comes time for a contest? How do you personally determine, who makes the grade as a reader? How does that process go? Where do they come from? Do they answer a classified ad? Do you put out a digital blast? Are they friends of yours?
All of the above.
Are those people? Okay.
Yeah, all of the above. So so initially for the first year, I definitely put an ad on Craigslist. I don't think I did this year because I think I had enough readers. But the first year, I definitely put an ad on Craigslist. I definitely put feelers out to my friends that are writers. I definitely through my network at Selling Your Screenplay, some of these people were sort of in the fold already. But it's all of the above. And then I get them to send me some coverage. I get a couple of pieces of coverage. I look at the coverage. I'll email with the person, and really I look at their coverage, and really I look at the feedback. This is the other thing: when people can give feedback, I listen to that. So if I get a reader that's consistently getting some bad feedback, we just get rid of them. I mean, it's not really any more complicated than that, but it's very unusual. Most of these, this is the great thing about the entertainment industry. And I can say this on the front end when you're hiring people to read scripts, but I can say it as a producer who's producing low budget movies. The one thing about the entertainment industry. It attracts so many people. There's more people than there is jobs in this business. So you always have very smart, very talented people to choose from. So, hiring crew for a film, being someone in Los Angeles, there's lots of really great, talented, creative people ready to go. And that's kind of frankly how I would see it. Now, in other industries, you try and do something like this, it's much more difficult, but there's no shortage of really good quality people that, at least from my perspective, good quality people. Now, are these people that have 20 years experience in the business? Of course not, because, I'm not paying them that much. I mean, the entry fee is at the early bird deadline. The entry fee is only $45. So you can do the math. I'm getting, 2, possibly 3 reads on these. How much can I afford to pay each person?
Yeah, it's like $15.
Exactly. So exactly. So it's very little money that I'm paying these things, but that again went into my decision.
Well, let me ask, I mean, you started out as a filmmaker and you said just in our pre-chat, you said you've been here since 90 something, as have I.
94. Yeah.
And did you just have different jobs and wanted to be a director? And I mean, what's your life story?
Okay, yeah, so we could do that. So I will recommend people go check out my podcast, episode 2. I did kind of a real deep dive into my origin story, but just to sum it up, I'm like probably a lot of people listening to this, probably like yourself, Lucas, just saying you grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. My mom was a school teacher at a Catholic school. My dad worked for the federal government. And so a very sort of average middle-class upbringing. We had my parents are awesome parents, good upbringing. Me and my brother were always into movies. We loved the movies. We grew up in the 80s. So we were just always really into movies. And as time went on, I got to college. I was an accounting major. I hated accounting. And I just really didn't think that was going to be a good fit for me. And so I just wrote up a bunch of script pages. I had a friend at this point. I'm going to college in North Carolina. He was going to Chapel Hill. He graduated from my college. It was a small liberal arts school called Guilford College. He went to Chapel Hill and enrolled in the film department there. And so he came back on weekends. We were doing like short films. I thought, oh, this is cool. So I just went and wrote a screenplay, and I found a couple of production companies to send it to, and started sending stuff out, and, was obviously rejected, out of hand with those, very naive early submissions. And, but slowly just got a little bit better. I graduated college, realized I didn't want to be an accountant. Me and a buddy, we just put everything in a pickup truck and moved out to LA. And that was in 94. So I've been out here just writing scripts and sending them out basically since then. And my first real credit was a movie called Dish Dogs. And no exaggeration, I found these people back then. This is like, again, in the late 90s, 97, I think, was when I sold it. And I found these folks in the back of Hollywood Reporter, Daily Variety. Production companies would put little ads back there and say, hey, new production company with funding looking for scripts. And me and my buddy
That's
Nate
where I got my first option was from the back of the drama log or the back of the
drama log, back pages.
Yeah.
Yep, all of that stuff. Yeah. That was a great resource back in the day. And there were real producers looking for stuff, and you had to send out a lot of letters. I mean, I would send just every week, I would methodically go through them all. Back pages, drama log, Daily Variety, Hollywood Reporter. I would go through them and just send these things out every week, and every now and then.
Snail mail. There was no internet. You had to
do it the guy from Nightcrawler.
It's laborious, and it took a lot of time.
Yeah. Wait, are we talking to Jake Gyllenhaal from Nightcrawler?
What's that?
You're like the guy from Nightcrawler.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna do everything. I'm gonna get everything. All right, without the murder.
That's your tenacity. You need that. You can't make it otherwise.
Yeah. So that's what it was. It was just purely the brute force method. And then I started getting a little better with my efficiency and figuring these things out. So then I started building these big lists, which ultimately became the blast that Lucas was talking about at the top of the podcast. Is I just started to build these large lists, and continue to this day to continue to build them.
Wow.
But when did you start your website and your podcasting, and how did that happen?
Yeah. So I was going along. So as I said, I got here in the mid 90s, and I was just writing scripts, sending them out. And then I sold this script in 97. It was called Dish Dogs. And it was about a $2 million movie, and I co-wrote it with a buddy of mine. And so I just, I'm pretty frugal. I'm pretty good with money. So I quit my day job and I just did nothing but write scripts. I lived off that money for 2 years and just wrote scripts. And I wrote about 10 scripts in 2 years and just kept really just sending them out. And, but I couldn't quite get it going. I optioned a bunch of stuff and I just couldn't quite get it going. So after 2 years, I started looking around, what else can I do? And that was, again, now we're in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so the dot-com bubble was sort of slowly building and building. So I got in a job really just doing tech support. But I had learned a little bit of HTML by doing my own website, ashleymeyers.com. I set that up really to promote my scripts. So I learned a little bit of HTML. So I got one of these .com jobs, and I learned a little more programming and just sort of learned some stuff on the technical side and worked for many years. That was 99. So probably worked for 10 years, really full time as a programmer. But I always was writing and trying to option stuff and sell stuff. And so just eventually I sort of had the technical chops to start setting up my own sites. And so I set up Selling Your Screenplay. And I originally had the idea, it just shows you how things morph. I originally had the idea to write a self-published book. And so I did this. I said, well, I'll basically write a self-published book called Selling Your Screenplay. And I'll just basically tell, at this point I had sold Dish Dogs, and maybe I had one other credit, sort of a self-funded low budget indie that I did, a feature that I'd done, and I'd optioned a bunch of stuff. So I said, well, I'll just write this book and I'll do self-publishing. And I did that through a company called Book Locker. And they said, the best thing you can do to promote your self-published book is start a blog. So then I was like, okay, I'll start a blog. Now I'd already bought the website, sellingyourscreenplay.com, to promote the book, just as a sales landing page for the book. So I just turned that into a blog and I started blogging. And, as time went on, I didn't really ever sell too many of these books, to be honest with you. I would sell 1 or 2 copies a month, and that was a good month. But eventually the blog started to get some traction. People were reading it. And so eventually I just started doing a podcast on top of it, really because I was listening to a lot of podcasts and I just really loved podcasting. So I thought, maybe this would be a good fit for Selling Your Screenplay. And it has proven a good fit. I'm not even sure it's like a good fit in terms of ROI. It's just a good fit because I enjoy doing it. I get to meet cool people, talk to cool people, and it does help me market Selling Your Screenplay and then bring people back, to those Selling Your Screenplay services. So that's a long-winded answer. Yeah, it's a long-winded.
No, these are great, but I wanted to make sure that Charlie didn't feel.
No. I was giving runway there. Yeah.
Do you? But your first dream is to be a filmmaker.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I'll say this, as someone now who's pretty competent as a programmer, I don't know that I really get any more joy out of writing a screenplay as I do out of writing code. It's that's the thing. I think to me, it's just about as fulfilling. I mean, there are creative aspects. Once you learn the syntax, and I'm not like some expert programmer and all these things. I know a little bit of Perl and I know PHP. These are fairly simple programming languages to learn. And, but once you learn them and you understand the syntax, to me, it's just like playing with Legos. You have all of these functions and all of these things you can use. And so to me, it's very creative and fun, the act of creating a website. And so I think that somewhat plays into what I've done with Selling Your Screenplay is there's, to me, there's creative fulfillment in running it as a business and the services, the products, how I sell them and the marketing, all of that stuff. To me is a part of my creative.
It's an incredible free resource. And I noticed you have transcripts for the podcast. Do you do those manually or AI?
No, we have a service that we use. It's and I don't even really remember. My wife does some of the administrative stuff for the site and she handles the transcript, but we have someone through Upwork that we just pay to do
and
it.
I don't mean to be nosy, but is the website big enough that it's your full-time business? It's
so no. And listen, I'm all about transparency. So no, there's nothing you're going to ask me that makes me uncomfortable or not with things. And so no, it's not my full-time. I would say it's about half of what my full income is Selling Your Screenplay. Obviously I make a little bit, some years are better than others. I make a little bit of income as a screenwriter, optioning, selling stuff. I do make a good bit of money off selling your screenplay. And then I also have another website. I have a bunch of other websites, but I have one other major website, and it's a utility for car dealerships to run their own car dealer website. And again, it's the same thing. It's a programming thing that I built and now offer as a monthly service, and it makes, more than selling your screenplay. So those combined is really what my income is.
So you're like a step away from making an iPhone app that's going to make you a multi-billionaire, is what you're
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like
but keep in mind, we're all a step away from making an app.
We're all one project away from
no,
finally.
it's the end of risky business. You're one hell of a future enterprise.
Yeah, exactly.
Ashley, if we could ask just on the screenwriting level, what, the 10 scripts you wrote in that year you were trying to make it as a screenwriter, like what kind of material were you writing at that period in the mid to late 90s? Do you remember what some of those scripts were?
Oh, I'm still trying to get most of them made. What do you mean, do I remember them? So, and in fact, the one that I wrote, the final one that I wrote is sort of those 10 is sort of a 500 Days of Summer rom-com, sort of indie rom-com. And that's actually, I was talking to Lukas before the podcast. That's actually the one the film I'm going to go do next. It really is very simple. It requires some houses, apartments, and a dive bar. So I just need to find the one location. It'll be very contained. So yes, some of those I'm trying to think if any of them got made. One of them I did sell. There was a film noir script called Irrefutable Evidence, which was always one of my favorite scripts. And I did sell the script to a producer, but he never actually went and produced it, unfortunately. And I don't have many of those on my resume, but there are a few, and that's definitely one of them. One of them, I definitely optioned. I optioned most of them. Almost all 10 of those I did actually option at one time or another.
That's pretty good.
But but I don't think, I'm trying to think if any of them got made. I'd have to look at the list and see. Actually, one of them did. There was although that was actually after the 2 years. I don't know. I'd have to look at which scripts I wrote during that 2 years and to tell you, but I know I optioned some and I'm still trying to get a lot of them made, to be honest.
Do you tend to write different genres?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I did, especially at that time, as someone who felt like I was still trying to kind of just establish myself. What is my voice? What am I going to be known for? I was writing in all different genres, trying to just find, what would hit. I think now lately I've been gravitating more towards, just low budget stuff that I can do myself. And that's tended to be more thrillery, horror. So the two movies I've written, directed, and produced are both more thrillers.
The posters behind you, are those yours?
That's a movie I wrote, Man Overboard. That was actually a comedy. The Man Overboard was a comedy that I wrote and executive produced. I helped raise the money. And then The Pinch is the other one. And that's one that I wrote, directed, and produced.
That's great. There's so many different paths. And some people end up writing, our friend Shane wrote Lethal Weapon when he was 23. And some people just get into the studio system, and some people decide they love directing television, and some people like being staff writers. And it's all interesting because it's just like how much pressure do you like to have in your life, and how weird is your taste? Like how would you describe your taste a certain way? Excuse me.
It's a good question, and no. I mean, I do think, speaking to your point, I do think it's important for new writers to figure out what is their career trajectory. It just ideally, what are they going for? Just exactly what you're saying. I frankly have never spent a lot of time writing, spec TV scripts. And I'm not saying that's a bad way to go. In fact, I would say most people would probably encourage new writers. I mean, we're in the golden age of television at this point. There's certainly way more jobs writing in television than there is in studio level screenwriting or even indie screenwriting. TV writing is a great place to be, but it's just not exactly what you're saying. It's never felt like a good fit for me personality wise. So I've sort of gravitated more towards these sort of indie genre films. And I like to watch them. I mean, I like studio fare. I watched Free Guy this past weekend with Ryan Reynolds, and I thought it was totally entertaining movie. So I like a variety of different types of movies. I'm not, it's got to be art or no. I like studio movies sometimes, and I like indie fare sometimes.
I guess a lot of it comes down to, would you rather rule in heaven, rule in hell or serve in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, because the posters behind me, excuse me, because I had a magazine called Film Score Monthly and we had a record label. So I spent 20, 25 years just running my own business because I didn't like anybody telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we would make, it was a big hit if we sold 3,000 Logan's Run CDs to a bunch of nerds. I'm, you know, one of the nerds myself.
Present company, etc.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, it was great that we'd go down to Comic-Con and I had money coming in, I had money going out, I had people working for me. And sometimes in hindsight, I wonder, I should have just become an apprentice. If I really wanted to be a filmmaker, I should have tried to go to IFI or something. But at the time I didn't want to. I was having so much fun just being the boss and being entrepreneurial and figuring out new things for myself.
But your career trajectory could have completely changed for all you know, Lucas. You could have been working as CEO of Rhino over at Warner Brothers. You could have been doing that.
But I didn't.
You never know.
I don't know. It's sometimes we do things in such a way that we go, well, I didn't really try to do it anyway. So we're so afraid of rejection that we do things. We sort of maneuver ourselves into positions where if it doesn't work out, it's like, well, it's okay. I didn't really want it, but of course I wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I never thought I wanted to own Rhino Records. I just wanted to be a little boutique record label. And I liked being a big fish in a little pond and being a mocker in the little film score boutique world where I made these CDs and I had a few thousand people going, we love you. You did a Star Trek II CD. Good job, you know, and it was fun for me because I love the music and I would get the tapes and I do the deals and I could decide what the packaging was. And I could write the liner notes and I could be like the.
But you were still working in the film business in the capacity.
It was like film business adjacent. It's so funny. Our old office is now anonymous content.
Huh?
Really?
In Culver City, because I looked up, I was like, wait a minute, I know that number, 8501 Washington. That was we were 8503. So anonymous this little crummy rundown building, anonymous content must have bought or done a long-term lease and renovated it into their fancy schmancy offices. It's as I used to say so many times, we're on Washington Boulevard on La Cienega Avenue, which is one light west of La Cienega Boulevard. And I remember one time looking out my window and Ed Norton was on his cell phone going, yeah, I don't think I'm lost.
Right.
Like we wanted to call down like, hey, where are you going? You know, the circle of confusion was like 2 buildings down.
Well, I think you're right, Lucas, that we all kind of forge our own path and figure out, you know, what we can do, right? What we have access to. Would we all like to be J.J. Abrams or somebody like him? Probably. But like, there's one J.J. Abrams. A lot of other people, you know, I have a friend who came out here who wanted to write and direct. And he's now a sound supervisor on a major network television show. He you know, that path just kind of found that path while he was writing and trying to make it in other ways. And he makes a very good living doing that now. Was that what he wanted to do in high school? Probably not.
Do you guys know who J.J. Abrams' dad is?
Yeah. I mean, it's
Jerry Abrams, who is a very well-known producer.
Yeah.
So
I mean, one of the things you just said, Lucas, though, you just said you liked being the boss, you like doing the things. And I feel like at the age that I've gotten to is that I look back on the things that I've done. And so often we feel like, oh, you know, exactly what you're saying. We didn't try hard enough for this or try hard on this, but a lot of it was because of our personality. And just exactly what you're saying was I never really succeeded in the corporate world because I was just a little too independent. I mean, I'm reasonably intelligent and reasonable. I'm a very reasonable person. So I could go to a corporate job and I could work and stuff, but I was never going to be like a standout or a star or an A+ person because I just wasn't that guy. And I think part of this is being realistic with yourself. Like, what is your personality and how is that going to fit? And I'll give you an example. I had a writer, this was years ago on my podcast, a Canadian writer, Craig Wenman, and he does a lot of Lifetime movies and that sort of stuff. Really cool guy, like nice, you're personable, smart. And I'm talking to him and, you know, he said to me, I asked the question, I said, well, how many of these producers are you still in touch with? Like he would option something and do some rewrites in this, and just the typical writer life where he would meet a producer, and I said, well, how many of these producers are you still in touch with? He said all of them, and he had already had at this point probably 10 or 15 produced credits. So he had tons of producers, and the thing is, I'm not in touch with any of these producers that I've optioned scripts to, because that's my personality. I'm always fighting with these guys when they option my script and they try and change it. I'm always annoyed by it. I'm always just sending them snarky comments about why their ideas are ridiculously bad and going to ruin the movie and stuff. And so again, I saw early on that I'm not going to be a studio screenwriter because I'm just too ornery. That's just not my personality. The studio level screenwriters, you've got to be able to put on, there's no I in the word team. You've got to be a team player if you're going to be a TV writer, if you're going to be a studio level screenwriter, because those people, those are huge teams. Those are not just some auteur like Stanley Kubrick making all these decisions. These big movies are teams of people, and everybody's got to be, rowing in the same direction. So for me in my career, it's been about, self-reflection. What can I do that's good? What are the talents that I have that can push me in a direction? And as I said, I'm pretty organized, so I can get these things together, like selling your screenplay. I'm pretty good on the producing front. So at this point, I'd rather do a low budget movie that I can control exactly the sentiment that you just said. I get to control everything. Sure, I don't have much money to make the movie, but at least I get to do it. And at least it's my vision. Maybe it's a terrible movie, but it's terrible. And all of that rests on me.
But so what's the next step? You certainly have a lot of aptitude.
Yeah, no. And so that is my plan at this point. Obviously I still have some scripts that are optioned or out there or whatever, but I don't spend as much time just pushing my screenplays anymore as I do trying to maybe put some deals together, raise a little bit of money, figure out some locations. And that's really what I'm planning on doing. I'm going to go do this rom-com. I'm working on a film festival right now. My film festival is going to be it's in sort of conjunction with the screenplay contest we were talking about. So in October 7th and 9th, I'm running this film festival. So that's my focus for the next couple of months.
Where's that going to be?
It's going to be in Hollywood, actually.
Cool.
It's a small theater called the Yard Theater, right? East Hollywood. We're going to run that. And I've rented the theater, and we're going to show a bunch of movies. I'm working on the schedule now and that kind of stuff. But once that's done, October and November, I'm going to start, ramping up and trying to figure out what movie I'm going to do next. And that's that again, it's just, I'm going to push in that direction. We're going to see where it goes.
What do you want out of the film festival? Why are you doing that specifically?
Yeah, so I did a low budget horror movie. It was we had Eric Roberts was our one name, and it was called The Rideshare Killer, and we shot that one at the end December in 1999, right before COVID started. So we got it done. The first year of COVID, we did our editing. The second year of COVID, we started entering these film festivals, and it was really disappointing. And I'm not someone who's like a Debbie Downer, negative Nelly. I've entered film festivals before with my films, and it's never as great as you want it to be, but I understand why my film doesn't get accepted. During COVID, these festivals, they were accepting the film, but they were like, oh, we can't do any screenings because of COVID. And this was like, there were LA festivals that were not going to do an in-person festival because of COVID. Meanwhile, movie theaters were back open. So there was no excuse. So I just really felt like the festival, just in general, the festival circuit has just gotten off track. And these people running the film festival, like there's no value to a filmmaker in doing the online festival. There's just no value to the filmmaker. The value to the filmmaker is in networking, celebrating film, seeing your film in front of a crowd. Those are the things that I think anyways, that I enjoy when I go to film festivals. So that really was my motivation. I'm in LA. Why not do a film festival and really try and celebrate low budget film? I'm going to try and screen as many films as I can. I've rented a theater for a weekend. We're going to just screen a bunch of films and really just try and celebrate the film. So that's really where it came out of, was just really a bad experience.
So a frustration with a film festival made you decide, I'm going to do it myself.
Exactly. Exactly. And see what it is. And I'm not going to break any laws or anything, but if we are legally allowed to, get together in a theater and show movies, I will be doing it. If it's illegal, obviously I'm not going to break a law, but I'm not going to just.
What would be illegal?
COVID. What's that?
What would be illegal? The COVID?
Yeah, I'm just saying if there's another COVID swell or something and they say no.
People are so over it. They're like,
I think so. 99.9% we're doing the in-person.
Yeah, my short was screened at Holly Shorts. I submitted to a bunch of things and didn't get in. I got into Holly Shorts, and they had it in a sci-fi block at like 1:30 in the afternoon in North Hollywood.
Did you go see it?
Yeah, I mean, I invited the cast and crew, and it was fun to see them. And it was like me and 6 other shorts. And it was a bad time to learn that the DCP had been made incorrectly because I tried to save $50 and some guy ruined it. So that was like, oh my God,
DCP. What are you saying there, Data? What does DCP mean? What is that?
The digital cinema print. It's just
Okay.
it's what they project now instead of actual film. So anyway, but my experience was sitting there and having 80% of the audience just be the other filmmakers and their buddies. And you sit through these shorts, and I got to say, a lot of them were pretty marginal. I mean, just they're amateurish. I mean,
well, have either one of you ever been a judge in a film festival before?
No, I never have.
Okay, because I
all right. Well, let me finish trashing everybody, and then you tell your story. So anyway, so it's like it was very dispiriting to me because all I was doing was watching my movie with bad sound, and then watching these other movies I didn't like, and then meeting some of these other people. Nobody else was there, and then they're like, "Okay, you guys," and then they brought us down to like to introduce your film, and and then it's like you just see the people are applauding for their own. I don't know. It was all just like
a little bit of a circle jerk.
It's
because it's the filmmakers all sort of congratulating each other.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say we try not to swear in the show, so my kids can walk away. It's fine, but the sentiment is quite accurate. But anyway, I mean, I don't want the Holly Shorts guy or was it Holly Shorts or was it LA? No, that was LA Shorts, Shorts Fest. And then I did another screen in Holly Shorts. It's just, it was not, you don't go and then have someone say, "Hello, I'm Spielberg's agent. I'd love to meet you." It's all like, "Hey, what was your film? What was your film?" "Oh, it was pretty good." And then it's like, "So why'd you make your films?" Because and then they was like, "So where'd you learn?" I was like, "Never took one lesson." And
I think the value, and there's going to be some of that in my festival for sure. I mean, it's my first year running this thing. Bringing in a large crowd is going to be difficult for these films. So there's going to definitely be some of that. But I think, to me, again, the value, as a filmmaker who's been to a few film festivals, I enjoy standing in the lobby and doing what you're saying, just chatting with some of the other filmmakers. And I mean, I don't know that I can think that there's ever been a real connection I've made at a festival, but
that's the possibility, though, right?
Yeah,
and the whole idea of going to a film festival is you want to go there to make connections professionally, but probably what you're going to do is you're going to make some friends. You're going to make some friends, and you never know what those friends are going to wind up going on to do. Is somebody from, like you said, Imagine going to be there? Somebody from Dad Robot going to be there?
No.
Unlikely. Maybe if it's local in LA or something like that, possibly somebody might show up if it's a higher end film festival. The only thing I was going to say, Lucas, when I so rudely tried to interrupt you, was that I haven't been to a lot of film festivals. I was asked to judge on a film festival during COVID, and I was staggered by the level of filmmaking, and not in a good way. That's why I wonder, like, when people say, like, "Well, I couldn't get my film at a film festival," and I was like, "And these are the ones that made the cut?" Like, what didn't make the cut?
Right.
Like, I mean, these are barely watchable. And here's the thing: I still have to applaud the people who tried, right? Because the thing is, it's hard enough to sit in front of a blank screen and write a script. It's a whole other kettle of fish. Hey, let's, like Mickey Rooney in the old movies, let's go make a movie, everybody. And you got to coordinate everybody's schedule, get out the equipment, the props and the costume and shoot and the lighting. And then we have to edit it. And that's a lot. It's a lot more than just taking your idea and writing a short story or writing a script. So, at the very least, you have to applaud the effort, and you want to encourage people. And look, not everybody's first film is going to be amazing. You'll learn, like screenwriting. You'll learn, hopefully, over time. But you know what? Great filmmakers do come from this sort of like homegrown outsider artist, Sam Raimi, George Romero, the guys who make mostly, I guess it's horror films. I was going to say there's not a lot of like indie dramas or, I guess there are a couple of sci-fi things, but
this reminded me. So when I was like 23, 24, one of my earliest offices before I was in the anonymous content building, I shared office space in the Roger Corman building, 5555 Wilshire. And I shared office space with the Los Angeles Independent Film Festival, as they were known at the time. And they also shared space with Filmmaker Magazine. And I sort of know those guys. We were going to share an ad agent. And I was around this film festival for a good year and a half. And nice folks, really. I made some good friends. And as they staffed up, they had a lot of volunteers. They had a lot of really cool people who were there. But it seemed obvious. And then I got, as part of my access, I got to go. They like say, here's a badge. So I got to go to a bunch of stuff. And I noticed that the worst movies were the opening and the closing night because they had celebrities. These were movies that had big names in them. They were like vanity projects, but they weren't good enough to actually get into Sundance or one in the film festival. They're like 4 or 5 film festivals that actually matter, like Sundance, Toronto, Tribeca. I mean, there's not that many. But then there's like another several hundred, and they keep on sprouting up because I think it's a way for people who want to be involved in film, who are out and wherever, to say, I'm not going to make it as a screenwriter, but I can run a business, and I can get the submission fees, and I can sign up for Without a Box or whatever they're using now. And so it's a way to have a business and be film adjacent, and a lot of good intentions. But they do get submissions. But what happens is that for the LA guys, there were a couple of cool movies, but they had nobody in them. But the opening and closing night, they wanted the glamour of Courtney Cox or whoever it was. And so I went, like other people, to the opening and closing night. I was like, this movie sucks. But you're doing the step and repeat with the cast of Friends because they're there for their friend. So it was kind of corrupt. And
but just and everything you're saying I relate to as someone who's now putting this festival together. But just think it through as the person running the festival. It's like, it's just exactly what you said. If I could get a crappy Courtney Cox movie to show in my festival, it's part of what I'm sitting here faced with now is, how am I going to sell all these seats? How am I going to actually fill the seats of the theater? And, having a crappy Courtney Cox movie might not be a bad way to do that.
No,
and that's the thing. It's so, but there does have to be some reality. Like, filmmakers do have to understand the reality of this. It's for instance, I'll give you an example of a film that I just think the filmmaker made a mistake submitting it. He had this feature film where the sound is nowhere near done. It's out of sync at times.
Oh, that is the worst.
It's like, but I can't show that film. And it's like, I just think people have to realize that someone has to go see this film. Not only does someone have to see it, someone, in this case, me, has to figure out a way to market this thing. Like, how am I going to bring an audience for a movie where the sound is out of sync? It doesn't have Courtney Cox, and it's made by an unknown filmmaker. Like, you tell me how you're going to market that.
You market it's the friends of the filmmaker.
What's that?
It's the friends of the filmmaker. I mean, I was 10 years ago, I made one of the world's only NC-17 movies. It's called Lucky Bastards, about murders in a porn set. And it's very misunderstood. And I'm proud of the movie, but at the same time, it's like a weird thing to explain. But I had the most rejections in my life. It was such a brutal experience, getting misunderstood. And some reviews loved it. The LA Times loved it. New York Times, they gave it to like a 5th string reviewer, said this is disgusting. So there's a ton of rejection. But I had at one point a film festival say, no film festivals would touch it because it looked like porn. It was not porn. It was about porn. And we got the ratings so that people would know it was an art film, because why would these idiots accept this kiss of death rating if it was actual smut? It was not. It was an art movie. We meant it to be about exploitation and like incels and bullying. I mean, it's a cool movie. It really is. But I couldn't get it distributed. I have it on Vimeo if anybody wants to see it. But it's not easy to watch. I mean, it is a deliberately unpleasant movie because I made it for $100,000. Anyway, this film festival finally accepted us. I was like, thank God, now I'm going to be rich, because obviously people will see how brilliant it is, because I couldn't get distribution. Mm-hmm. And then at the last minute, this guy, it was like the New York something film festival. It was like, oh, Tribeca? No. Oh, then no, it was like the 5th string New York Film Festival. And at the last second, the guy said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, but we discovered your film was actually shown somewhere and we have to withdraw our invitation, but I'll have a special screening for you for $5,000. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
And then the guy got angry at me and I was like, oh, it's a con. Okay, I understand.
Huh.
So it was a con. It was a bait and switch con to get me to finance. I mean, it was the vanity of the filmmakers, because I went through the experience of thinking that I was a genius, I was going to make a fortune, that this was, and there is truly, I can say this and not exaggerate, there is no movie on the face of the earth like my movie, Lucky Bastard. There is no movie at all like a found footage movie on a porn set. And we had some cool actors. We got an actor named Jay Paulson, who was the brother, Don Draper's brother on Mad Men. He's a terrific actor. He played the killer. And it's very well made. I learned a lot from my colleague who co-wrote it and directed. His name is Robert Nathan, and he was a showrunner for Dick Wolf. He did Law and Order. He did ER. And he was and so I learned like from the real deal, like this is how you tell a story.
It occurs to me that running a film festival is almost like running a restaurant where you're at the mercy of a bunch of amateur chefs who've made a bunch of dishes and you have no idea when people come in to pay good money. Like, oh, what is this? It's supposed to be like a goulash. It's like, oh my, and every dish is just awful. But it's like, listen, I have this beautiful restaurant and the servers are great. And, but the food.
But the magic, part of the magic though, is that you're going to discover something awesome, and I heard an interview by the guy that does Slam Dance. And he had Christopher Nolan come through with his movie, The Following, back in 1996 and stuff. So it's like, I think we all hope, that we're at the film festival and we discover something super cool. But you're right. I mean, a lot of this stuff is on the lower end, especially my festival, because I'm purposely going after low budget stuff. Like that's sort of the whole shtick of it.
Oh, I remember one weird film festival we went to. Have you guys ever heard of Dan Savage's Hump Festival?
No,
but I like Dan Savage.
Okay, wait, maybe it's not Dan Savage. What's the? Okay. It's an amateur porn festival, but it's not sleazy. It's like elevated. It's an elevated. My wife and I once went downtown to this thing called the Hump Festival, and because I had heard about it, and it's I thought his name is Dan Savage. He's like a sex columnist.
Yeah, Dan Savage.
Okay, yeah.
He's on Bill Maher.
Okay, yeah,
he's on Bill Maher a lot.
Okay, so he hosts something called the Hump Festival every single year, and it's homemade porn films, but with a more elevated eye towards what they're doing. So, and it's the whole gamut. So it's like literally just across the board. And my wife and I didn't know what to expect, but it was like a well-dressed, smart downtown Los Angeles crowd showing up at a theater, and for whatever it was, 2 hours. And the films are shorts, so it's like 5 minutes maybe, or 7 minutes or whatever. But the spectrum of activity was.
Wait, can I ask? Is this actual like penetration?
During COVID, they were doing it digitally because they couldn't have people.
No. I mean, are the films literally of like sexual penetration?
Yes. Yeah. No.
Okay.
Graphic, absolutely graphic, but across the board in terms of subject matter. So gay, straight, trans, just everything, BDSM, everything, and we didn't know what to expect. And early on, my wife and I were watching it, and at certain points, your hand is sort of creeping over your face, like, okay, like this is something I've never been, witness to before, right? But we're in a crowd of like, several hundred people, and you find that like anything over time, after an hour and a half, 2 hours of watching this, your hand starts going down because you're just like observing and sort of seeing all this different activity, and you're just like, definitely wasn't all my taste, but it was kind of an interesting experiment in a certain genre. And certain films were certainly more ambitious and more interesting than others. But since Dan Savage is curating the whole thing, obviously you're not just picking stuff you would see on Pornhub. That's not the point. The point is to do things that are much more interesting, elevated, curious. And so that was an example of like a very narrow and specific genre of film festival that he's been very successsul with. I mean, he does it in a bunch of cities. It's not like one city every year. He'll take it for to LA, Seattle, Chicago, New York, Miami, that kind of thing. But I just remember that.
All right, there was one time in college This is such a classic college story. It was the mid-90s at Amherst. And there was a screening of some kind of documentary that had to do with, it might have been about a gay porn star, but it was about gay sex in one way or another. I don't remember. So there was a girl I liked who I had a crush on who didn't like me, who was going with some friends to see this. So of course I went because I liked the girl. And I sat there and I watched 90 minutes of hardcore gay porn.
You must have really liked this girl.
I had a crush on her. But I'll tell you what, it was the most interesting thing is that after that experience, I could say like 100% categorically, I am not gay.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, the ultimate Clockwork Orange Ludovico treatment, and it's still.
I mean, if there was any, like, if I had any doubt about my sexuality, it's like, no, I'm really not turned on. But it was,
Yes.
it was
The rest of your
interesting.
classmates weren't so sure after that.
No, it's, I don't want to joke about anybody. It's just,
Yeah.
It takes
you
more
know,
than exposure to material to
Exactly.
figure out what you want to do, and that's
Yeah.
not a way to do it. But yeah, that's really.
no, but it
that's
was,
really-
I don't, all right, less said the better, but the girl was really
I
cool.
thought your story was going to be, one night at the frat house, me and my buddies got a little too drunk.
No,
It's like, okay,
no.
all right, Lucas, maybe not for this show.
Well, tell me about your short, Lucas. Like your short, as I said to you, was really excellent. How many festivals did you submit it to? Like, what was your landing rate there? And that should give people a real good indication of how much of this is just political and everything else.
All right, so people should know my short is a sci-fi piece, and that I really made as not even a proof of concept, but as proof of director, because I had a sci-fi film that I actually had a producer interested in. Then I said, I want to direct it. And it was pretty much, look, you've never directed anything. You've got to make a proof of concept. So I raised money in Indiegogo. I put my own family money in. It was a lot of drama. Got this thing done. Came out pretty watchable, I think is true. And I'm proud of it. And but as far as festivals, I was so jaded by the experience I had with Lucky Bastard that it's like I know that even if I know that there are only a few that matter. And also I had little kids at home. I had like 3-year-old twins. So it's like, I don't want to travel the country going to film festivals anyway. So I didn't want to spend like $2,000 in submission fees just to get rejected. So I only did like Toronto or a couple of big ones that turned me down because it's a cool short, but it's not like, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It's not mind blowing. It doesn't even necessarily suggest the feature that I want to make from it. It was really just meant to be a sample of my filmmaking. Oh, he can direct actors, he can get performance, he can use visual effects, he can hold the attention with the camera, even though I'm kind of very much a stranger with the camera. I had a really good DP. So I got into LA Shorts. I had that experience I told you in 1 p.m, just sitting there with the cast and crew with the bad sound. I was like, what's the point of this? I got it into Holly Shorts. They had like a nighttime, not their real festival, but some nighttime thing. And same thing. It was like, okay, you're just there, you meet the other filmmakers. How are you? What are you doing? What are you doing? And so I wanted to get the movie made. For me, I was thinking past the short. I didn't really care about the short. I already had what people do the short to do. I had producers who were making money, who were making real cash offers to stars who, if anybody had said yes, I would have been making a movie. But the script was not good enough. And people turned us down for a bunch of reasons. The film did not work for the foreign sales model because the roles were not for, hey, Eric Roberts, will you take 50 grand for 3 days work? It didn't have the kind of math in the roles that I could get a Nick Cage or a Lance Henriksen, who calls these as Romania movies, because he just takes the money and they put him on a plane to Romania, and that's all he knows. And he just does whatever they say for 4 days and comes home. So it's for young stars. And when you have young stars, you're kind of in hell, because either you have to go after famous people who don't need your money, like Daniel Radcliffe does not need our money, or anybody I thought was cool, who I'd seen who's great at coming up on a TV show, or as the third guy in a movie, who really had some interesting star power, was a good actor. They were just like, we cannot sell this name. It's like, if your mom does not know who this person is, we cannot make this movie. I'm like, but this guy's so good, doesn't matter. because they're selling it foreign. They're going to make the movie off of the foreign pre-sales, and they're lagging 5 to 10 years behind us. So they know who Daniel Radcliffe is. But the guy who is in some hip horror movie that's really about to blow up, they don't know who he is.
People who are going to the Red Box in Bulgaria have to know who he is.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's an important point that filmmakers don't always understand. Like all of those kids that are on Stranger Things, you know, their careers are going this direction. So they're not going to star in a low budget site.
Exactly.
They want to star. And whereas these other guys you mentioned, like Eric Roberts, their careers are not going that direction. So they need to make a living and having some of those 50+ roles, male and female, you do need to finance.
So funny. I've been working on this script so long that I remember one point saying, like, somebody said, "Who do you see?" I said, "Man, there's this really good actor on a TV show. He's really, really interesting. His name's Adam Driver." And of course, and now that, of course, he's the biggest movie star in the world, he wants to work for Scorsese and Ridley Scott.
Yeah, exactly.
So anybody who means anything, you can't get. So I had a movie that I had a producer for a model that it would not work. And now that I've reconnected with one of the producers who's been super gracious and interested and willing to talk to me, he read the new script, liked it. He's engaging about, well, what are the costs of the visual effects? You know, this looks expensive. And then I told you about the whole visual effects problem, because there's no one cost for visual effects. It's like, guys, do you want it to look like an episode of The Expanse, or do you want to look like a Star Wars movie? Or do you want to just spend 200 grand, which we can do, but it'll look like an Asylum movie. It'll look like Sharknado. So no, that's not what we want for this movie. It's a real movie. So it's just very different. And the other way to do it is to try and get a manager to submit the short and the feature, to real production companies who have deals like Blumhouse, and people who have deals with Stage 6, or, you know, like Ryan Johnson's company, or these people, but they're chasing, it's too small for them, because they want scripts that are going to be $90 million event movies. If it's original IP, that's another thing that kills you. They want horror movies that they can make for $4 million that are based on an awesome short that got 30 million views. My film got like 2 million views, which is a lot for a short film, but it's not in the $30 million range. So I had this thing that it's also very execution dependent. So it's like they see it and, okay, so the concept is there's two people in a spaceship, and it's sort of like an Outer Limits episode, but it's not super high concept the way that it needed to be to really move. It's not the Purge high concept. You can't.
Or it's not Passengers or something.
It's not Passenger. Well, no, but the thing that I'm trying to explain to this producer now, without making myself a pest, is I'm trying to explain that this is a movie that is about a feeling that will be more successful than the script looks. I said, don't even read it for the effects. Anybody can do the effects. This movie is about a feeling of belonging, it's a romance, but there's no sex. There's no kissing. It's a love story between these two characters who find themselves on the edge of the universe and save each other, and they save mankind. And it's a story that's older than dirt, which is that it's a bad man becomes a good man from the love of a good woman. Redemption, yeah. And I never talk about these things, but it does sometimes, to articulate it, make me emotional, because I do know the feelings there, and it's not just that I feel it, but I know how to build it into the filmmaking, so that when we're doing it, directing, this is what I learned just from doing this short. It's about these isolated little moments that in your head are going to build to a greater whole. And it's very hard sometimes, because especially when you're dealing with something that's visual effects heavy, no one else is going to see it but you, because it's in your head. Even when it's on the script, there were moments of humanity that I knew that I was looking for, and that I found between the characters. The only special effects that matter are the expressions on the actors' faces. And it really is about the grease on their hands, and it's about the sweat on their foreheads. It's about moisture on the windshield when they're flying through a planet's atmosphere. Those are the things that the audience remembers. They remember things that are emotional. They remember things that are experiential. And
Nick Cage couldn't be the male lead.
Movie, the 65-year-old fighter pilot.
Yeah.
That was the other thing. These guys were like suggesting 50-year-old rappers. I was like, guys, he's a fighter pilot. Fighter pilots are not 50 years old. Except for Tom Cruise now. But
Mos Def can do it. Yeah. Mos Def can play a fighter pilot.
I don't know, guys. So it's a very frustrating thing because I feel like I made a short that's really cool, and I thought it would open doors for me if only people saw it, but I got a lot of doors slammed in my face because it was like nobody really knew how to sell it. And because what I did was I got to a level of competent filmmaking on a shoestring, but that didn't impress people because they're used to seeing competent filmmaking all the time. So it's a kind of weird trap because
so once again, it's about the idea, right? I mean, as you're saying over and over again, if somebody just sees the poster or hears the idea, they might be, it might be all in the execution. But when you're trying to market something, right, it can't be in the execution. It's got to be in the concept.
I did not think this one through. And so what I've done since then is I've written other things that are more attractive to their concept, but because I have this very expensive short film that I'd still like to realize as a feature, I'm still trying to push it along. But it would have to be more expensive as a first-time filmmaker is used to. Most first, they make that. But I already had my $100,000 movie. It was just rated MC-17, and I didn't actually direct it because I didn't know enough to direct it. So I had my friend direct it. He was the first-time director, but he had been on Dick Wolf sets for years and years and years. He knew so much about. People don't really understand how to direct actors. They really don't understand how you build scenes. They don't understand the arcs of how you build characters. They just don't. They don't know how to say, okay, wait, when you do this, I need the moment when you stop and you think and you're wondering if you're going to trust them, and then you go back into it. And they don't know that you need that not only for that scene, but for the entire tapestry of what that character means to the audience. Because the audience sees that moment and they go, oh, she doesn't know. And it changes everything about how they relate to that character. I mean, we were talking to a very good writer last week, Jonathan Stokes. And I said, this is my theory. The more I've learned about storytelling and screenwriting, if the only thing that matters, the only thing is truthful human behavior. And if that is accurate, if it's emotional, if it's interesting, you can build the story, you can structure a character, the climax, the set pieces, the shooting, everything, you can make it work. It's hard, it's complicated, they're not easy, but you have to start from the place of these being real. They're not real people, they're characters, and yet they have to relate to the audience. The audience are real people, and they understand, oh, this person's afraid, this person doesn't know, what is this? You have to communicate to the audience, who is this person and what do they want? And what's stopping them? Because then they get invested. You need to use real situations right at the top of your short or at your feature so that somebody has a reason to empathize with this character. And the situation can be a bad blind date. It could be getting in trouble in school. It could be your kid is being mean to you.
I mean, Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. That's sort of the premise of literally of the book Save the Cat. Where do you stand on that sort of stuff, though?
I've never read it.
The Blake Snyder, the Sid Field, that sort of prescriptive structure.
I don't.
Sid Field was the very, very first screenwriting book that I read, and I have to say that out of the million things after that, that's the only one that still sticks with me to this day. And every single thing I ever write is still based on his paradigm. It still works. Everything else is kind of variants of that.
Have you read Save the Cat?
Yeah, I've never read all of the Blake Snyder book at all. I mean, I was working in the industry when Blake was, selling material. And so, again, you don't have to look, just because you're David Mamet, just because you're Aaron Sorkin doesn't mean you can teach somebody to write like you do, because so much of that is intrinsic to who you are. Consequently, some of the greatest teachers might not be great writers. They can teach principles, they're good at connecting with their students, but they themselves might be awful. I remember I had I won't name the teacher, but in college, one of my screenwriting teachers, who was venerated and there for 20, 30 years, always wrote scripts, wanted to be a screenwriter professionally, but he taught at this school that I went to. And, you know, I finally had an opportunity to read one of his scripts. You know, I'm like, oh, finally, the guy who's teaching screenwriting is going to let me read his screenplay. It's going to be amazing, right? And it was even a high concept idea. It was like a really high concept idea. I'm not sure if he's still alive, so I don't know that I should mention the idea. But let's just say it was like a kind of a time travel romantic comedy kind of idea. And it was just very middle of the road, just very generic, middle of the road, kind of flat. It had a decent idea. The writing was technically proficient, but just kind of just blah.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a sobering moment for me where I was like, huh, okay. You know, I mean, the guy's a good teacher and he certainly taught a lot of things that I still use to this day, but like, he wasn't a great writer. And then when I moved to California and you know, CAA was the biggest agency in the world. And I'm like, oh, anything that comes from CAA is going to be the best screenplay imaginable, right? Because there's all these agencies. This is the top of the mountain. Everything's got to be great coming from CAA. And then when I started working for a company and reading material from CAA, the red cover with CAA on there, I'm like, this is going to be awesome. Sometimes it wasn't awesome. Often it was like, again, technically proficient, solid, you know, but didn't necessarily blow my socks off. And I was like, okay, I mean, this is an interesting learning experience to see that, like, you know, just because somebody is a brilliant writer, they might not necessarily be able to be great at teaching you those principles. Somebody who's not a great writer could. And then maybe there's guys that are kind of right in the middle or something like that. Clearly, a lot of people like Blake Snyder for whatever reason. And I have this sense, even though I haven't read it, that it's probably so cookie cutter in terms of the way that you drop your elements in, that you think, okay, this is the way that, like, I'm going to just add idea and I'm going to have like a marketable commercial screenplay. But it still always comes down to the idea, the premise, the concept, the very notion of what your idea is. And Lukas and I have gone through this on so many of our shows, which is, what does it matter if you spend 6 months writing an idea and working so hard to get it down when you're driving, you know, with somebody who's like, oh, what's your idea about? You know, it's about a guy who moves to Timbuktu and opens a falafel shop. What else happened? Well, that's the idea. It's really great. It's a character drama, and it's incredibly moving, and it's like so powerful, and it's a generational. It's like, I am so sorry. Like I can't. I'm not going to solicit that script. I don't have time.
It's so unfair because The Bear is the show I keep hearing about. The Bear is great about a guy who comes back to run a kitchen. That's the whole thing. But it also is by a guy with a great track record.
Well, that's the only reason that's on there, because if that was somebody's first idea, he's not selling that idea. It's got to be somebody who's already proven they can write compelling television. Then you get your chance to sell an idea that's like a little less immediately compelling. But if you're just trying to break in, you don't get that. You know.
Yeah, I want to answer.
The other big, just one last note on Blake Snyder. The other big thing on Blake Snyder, I have read it and I think his books are quite excellent. I feel like it's the next evolution from Sid Field. He just has a little more wit and style, but it's very similar to Sid Field's paradigm. But the other thing about Blake Snyder's structure, everybody that reads the book wants to put all the emphasis on the Blake Snyder beat sheet. And that's definitely a big part of it, but there's a lot more to the Blake Snyder book. And in fact, I was having a discussion the other day with someone that had like an idea for an app or something. And, you know, in Blake Snyder, one of the things he recommends early in his book, if you have a really great idea for a movie, next time you're in Starbucks, just turn around and start pitching it to the people that are standing around you, see what their reaction is. And this is so counterintuitive to so many new writers, because they want to protect their idea, not, it's this great idea, someone's going to steal it. And I think, there's a lot of other great pearls of wisdom in Blake Snyder, aside from just the Blake Snyder beat sheet. People, new writers especially, they want something prescriptive that's easy. Okay, well, if I just put my plot point here and things, but obviously it needs to be more organic and stuff. So I think sometimes some people lean on Blake Snyder, but he himself would not think that it's some prescriptive method to get, it's not a connect the dots type of a thing. And some people, I think, lean into that. And that's sort of the criticism, but that's not, in my mind.
Well, and also just the reality, again, of working in the business for 30 years, I can tell you with all honesty, nobody in the business ever ever talked about Blake Snyder, understood what that book was. I mean, that was purely a book for people trying to break into Hollywood. It was not a reference point from people who develop movies in Hollywood. Nobody in Hollywood that I ever interacted with.
But don't you think that's going to change, because Sid Field was written in 1979, Blake Snyder was 2005. So as a new generation of screenwriters comes in, I think most people probably now have not read Sid Field, but they probably read Blake Snyder as new.
I don't think I never referenced Sid Field. I mean, even when we were talking amongst ourselves and we were breaking down story and that kind of thing, it wasn't like any of us were like, pull out, our Sid Field book. And let's like see what he talked about when it came to this, this, and this. Frankly, the way we all did it was we watched movies all the time. We watched classics. We watched current movies. We knew what was going on in modern Hollywood and what had been made in classic Hollywood, and we just deconstructed those things. And it's like if we were working on something that was in the genre of a comedy or a thriller or science fiction or a drama, then we would all just instinctively, what are the movies that are in the ballpark of what we're developing right now, and how did they address some of the narrative challenges we're facing right now? You would go through and talk over some of those possible solutions, and then you'd come up with a consensus answer that everybody kind of agreed, okay, this is the best prescription for let's try this version of it. And bit by bit by bit, you would fill in the blanks as you were going through it developmentally. What we didn't do was we didn't pull out some, book written by, some screenplay at screenwriter written at one moment in time and assume based on that, that's the text of every single, project we're going to develop from now on, because it evolves over time, obviously, right? But there are classics that everybody should know. And if you don't, boy, like Lukas and I, we talk about Chinatown and movies like that. Like Robert McKee is obsessed with Chinatown. That's what he thinks, that's the perfect film. And in a lot of ways, it's a great film. I love Chinatown too, right? So he focuses on that. What I focus on all the time is Back to the Future. I think Back to the Future is a perfect film. It teaches you everything you need to know about structure and character and tone and theme and everything. But that might not be applicable for every single, if I'm developing Howard's End, or if I'm developing, Downton Abbey, that might not be the model to reference. So I think you just have to have a very, very broad, expansive vocabulary of whatever the medium is that you're doing. It could be plays, it could be music. And that's what the best filmmakers, when we would have these roundtables, we would call it, where we were working, let's say we're working on Pirates of the Caribbean or something, and where, the movie's done, but it still needs work. And we're talking about maybe doing reshoots. So we would, corral a half a dozen of the top screenwriters in Hollywood, the Shane Blacks, the Greg Mazins, people like that. We'd get them in a room. They've just seen the movie. And it's like, okay, what does everybody think about what we just saw? What are some of the weak spots that we have to fix? And then they would discuss various ways to do that. But it was all based on their experiences, the movies they've loved, what they're bringing to the table. And again, if you're an aspiring screenwriter who doesn't naturally do that, like if you want to be a screenwriter and you're like, well, I'll just buy Save the Cat and boom, Bob's your uncle. It's like, you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it, because that one source that everybody's telling you is going to crack the code for you is marginally helpful in some ways, but the things that are really going to make your career stand out in a meeting, make you conversant with other people who work in the business, is going to be this deep wellspring of information about past and present cinema that you can talk to them and be on an even playing field about. Even early on, when I was getting into the business and trying to get a job in the business, the people I connected to when you were in that interview or talking to them was about like, well, what are you watching? What movies do you like? And if you didn't connect on that level, you're done. Because the thing is, they can smell, whether you're a phony or whether you're a neophyte, or whether you're somebody who eats, sleeps, and breathes this business and understands the common references and the things that are important, because that's what you're going to need when you're in the crucible of making a movie. $100-200 million movie, and you're in those meetings and it's late at night and your brain is like firing all these different directions, and you've got to get something on paper because you're going to shoot it the following day, you damn well better know what the hell you were talking about. Go, oh, wait a minute, and Save the Cat on page 37. Like, get this guy out of here. That's never going to work. It's got to be the person who is like steeped in, just the love of cinema. And that's the only way you even get in a room. That's the only way you're one of the people in that room when you're discussing those things. So it's like anything else. If you're a professional athlete, it's not going to, you're not going to watch one tape of Jimmy Johnson's coaching and go, that's the way you get to be a professional athlete. You watch, games, and you read books about athletes, and you go to as many in person as you can, and you eat, sleep, and breathe it, and get up at 5 a.m. to go rowing or whatever it is. Those are the people that are ultimately going to succeed. And I know that the people who don't do that don't want to hear that. I know.
And I don't disagree. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but listen to the thing you said, as 30 years of experience, I do think that these books like Sid Field and Blake the Snipe, they can be a part of exactly that deep well that you're talking about. And I think, and here's the thing, I think there's always, to me, there's always this sort of straw dog argument. Sid Field himself, if he was still alive, or Blake Snyder himself, if he was still alive, they would not tell you that you can just read my one book and then that's all you need. They would tell you, write a lot, read a lot of other scripts, read a bunch of other books. So it's the writers who want that come, they show up. Hey, I read Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. Does that mean I'm ready to be a professional screenwriter? No, jackass, go to the back of the line and keep working. And it's like, but it's not the gurus that are prescribed, setting this stuff out in a prescriptive way. These are just one tool of many. I mean, not unlike this podcast.
Right. The one tool of many, you're right in that sense. Here's why I'm going to say, I'm not saying Save the Cat is necessarily bad. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if that represents 80 to 90% of your screenwriting knowledge,
then you got problems.
You're a screenwriter, you're screwed. Yeah. You're like, and that is not what you should be doing. I'll be honest with you. I will read anything about screenwriting online if it pops up in my feed, if it's on Google, even if it's from some random website I've never heard of before. I'll spend a minute or two reading it and see, like, is there anything I can extract from that? I'm not so haughty and arrogant that I think that I know everything about everything. In fact, the hallmark of somebody who's genuinely smart is somebody who realizes how much they don't know. It's such a complicated field that, like, I got to be humble about this, and I got to go, you know what? I might learn something from talking to the guy cutting my meat at the deli, a bit of human behavior or something about desire or something about longing that I'm going to be able to incorporate into my work. If you're just some snobby, snide, arrogant idiot who's just like, I know everything I need, you're not going to make it either. You have to be constantly observant to what's going on in the world around you, because you never know when you're going to remember that line that the guy said. That's a perfect line. That's exactly right. I remember the screenwriting teacher that I was telling you about, whose script I didn't love, right? I remember there was an example he always used about a scene in a movie. I don't remember what the movie was, but it was a guy wearing a hat with his wife in an elevator. And, he holds the elevator door open for a young lady who comes in there. And as the young lady comes in, he takes his hat off. And it was like what that conveyed to the man. Like, he didn't do that for his wife, but he did that for this younger woman. And it was just a little subtle bit of character behavior. I don't even remember what it meant to represent, but I do remember that the way he told that moment was so interesting, because yes, it is true. Just a little tiny thing could be so profound. When people talk about stakes in movies, every stakes doesn't have to be Avengers Endgame, and it's the multiverse. It could literally be a guy who's just trying to pay the rent so his family's not homeless next month. And it could be the most wrenching, powerful thing you've ever seen that has you blubbering at the end of the movie. And it's just it's how you do that. And if you could do that well, then you're a good writer. You could be a great writer. And if you can't find a way to make that interesting, you need to do a lot more work.
Yeah. So I think that sums it up. I totally agree. It's like Sid Field, all these things, less than 1% of your overall knowledge should be any one of those.
Here's my crackpot theorizing. Because I think I read Story by McKee, which I liked, but I never had a lot of luck following the prescriptions in those books. When you're starting out learning how to do this, it's an additive process. You're just like, how do I fill this movie with stuff, with enough stuff? And it's very deceptive because there's so much white space in the format that you can actually fill those pages. It's not like a novel. It takes all those words. So you fill it with stuff that happens. So you fill it with plot, and you kind of get to the end and go, okay, it's done. But you're not really thinking that the real process is a process of simplification. It's a process of revision. It's a process of choosing the best one from many, many different options. And it's funny, when I used to hang out with Shane, there was a time when he was working on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and he had been writing it for like 3 years. And I gave him a ride to his office. I dropped him off and I said, what are you doing, by the way? Because I thought the thing had been done for a long time. He goes, I'm trying to simplify it. I was like, oh, but aren't you famous for having really complicated, mystery plots? And maybe that's why he was trying to simplify it. But somebody at that caliber is always looking to make things simpler, clearer, more direct. And that's a process of editing, but it's a process of editing the ideas. And so what happens, the process for me of learning how to do this, which took only 20 years, and I thought I was one of the smart ones, but it was absolutely confounding. I wrote tons and tons of not viable scripts, is because it took so long to realize that the process of writing all these stories and trying to figure out what happens and trying to figure out what is our movie, what happens in our movie, that the real guideline that I needed to follow was the human behavior and emotion, because that's what really connects to the audience. But you get to a point where you've got a sort of lattice work of stuff that comes from the book, and then you've got this lattice work of things that you think are interesting emotionally, and they're not going to be compatible, because you're trying to follow a pattern on the one hand, and then you're trying to fill in stuff that you know to be real and true and meaningful. And eventually you have to just say, okay, enough. I need to start over. And I need to go back to the idea, the very basic idea, the thing that got me interested in writing this, and say, let's build this again emotionally. And let's not just pick the first thing that came out of our head when we were trying to do it 10 years ago. Let's think, who is it about? Why is it happening? Why is it happening now? Where is it happening? Does it happen? Lukas, does it really need to happen in outer space? No, save some money. Don't. If it doesn't need to happen in outer space, don't put it in outer space. If it doesn't need to have that set piece that you thought was cool where the bridge explodes, don't have that set piece. It's going to cost $80 million. So all this stuff is now a process of editing, but through a filter of feelings. And feelings are something that I had the sense, they go to writing to escape.
Well, movies are a delivery system for emotional experience.
Correct.
That's what movies ultimately are. And the emotional experience varies depending on the genre. If you're going into a horror film and it's not scaring you, you failed.
Here's my point. I have the sense, and I know from just my own life, is that you have a dream, you love movies, you don't have enough money to be a director, you're not good enough to be looking enough to be an actor, you want to be a writer, great. And so what can I do on my own in my computer and after the kids go to sleep? I can write my script. So there's a sense of, I don't like working at the insurance agency. My marriage is my marriage, my kids are, there's a sort of it's the everyday world I'm actually trying to escape, because I'm writing the story of Xandar, the warrior on the planet King, But a lot of people do that. A lot of first scripts are like these sort of sideways versions of Star Wars, of Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, and it's just underwater. That's my twist. It's underwater. No, it's not. That sucks. So, so many of these things are just, and I wrote them too, and then they come out with their mythology about the seven.
We all do.
And the kingdoms, and it's just, and because we all read Marvel comics that were done by a lot of bad comic book writers. They just did their own Star Wars ripoffs. And
but Lukas, if I can interrupt you here,
please.
What you're describing is very important. You have to go through that process when you're learning and finding your voice, it is imitative. The first thing that we do when we're learning to be writers is, what do I like? Right? I like Westerns. I like science fiction. I like horror. So what's the first thing that you do when you're learning is, okay, even when you're 5 years old, when you're a kid, I like these comics, so I'm going to draw my comic. And it's like the most boiled down, simplistic version of like superheroes fighting a Godzilla or something, something very simple. But over time, you learn to do your own version of that. You bring your experience, your knowledge, your skills, your imagination, your creativity to those things that are at first very imitative, because that's how you learn. And then slowly but surely you put your own spin on the ball. And if you're good at that, if you're the person who puts an amazing spin on it, then you become George Martin and you write, Game of Thrones. You take Lord of the Rings and you infuse it with all those things that make Game of Thrones so relevant and cool and timely and interesting, and set it apart from the thousand, as you pointed out, Xandar the Warrior generic fantasy things that nobody cares about, because he found a way to make it really cool and interesting. And so, that is kind of your job as a screenwriter, is to find your voice and to take the things you loved, but do a version of it that is new and different and interesting and relevant, whatever the genre is. And by the way, there'll always be hacks that make money and do sort of the generic version of that thing. In fact, the vast majority of any medium, as we've discussed, is hackery. There's 20% of it that's great in music and art, in movies. 20%, that's the classic, brilliant stuff. And 80% of it is kind of generic dross, because you got to sort of fill the need, right? Not every single erotica novel is, Lady Chatterley's Lover. Most of them are, crap that Ed Wood wrote to pay the bills on his Ivar and Yucca apartment in Hollywood. But you know what? Maybe one of those that gets written turns out to be like this weird genius masterpiece that somebody discovers after he's gone. You just would never know that. But I'm just saying, when you Lukas in his own experience is kind of making fun of that period. You're going to go through that period. Of course you're going to. The trick is, don't get stuck in that cul-de-sac. You have to break out of that cul-de-sac. Stay in it to learn the skills. Then you hopefully move out of that cul-de-sac.
Wait, I have a few more points, please. So what happens though is people spend so much time laboring on this stuff, then they get to the point where like, okay, how do I sell it? How do I get a manager? How do I make money? When they don't have one great script, they have a portfolio of okay scripts, and that doesn't help, because what they're not doing. They're not doing the hard emotional work of making their stuff of really distinctive and really different. And it's quite possible that they don't have the talent to do that. And you really can't teach talent. And the secret sauce is emotion, but it's very hard to teach emotion too, because everybody's experience is unique. I can't just say, if I had a student writer, I can't just say, well, hey, what was your relationship with your mom like? I'll bet your mom gave you a hard time. Just draw on that, even though that's The Sopranos. So,
and I'll put in another, you guys are talking about these sort of, you're going to do your own version of Star Wars or whatever. What I see also is the opposite of that. I see a lot of new writers writing these incredibly personal stories about, my summer at band camp. Oh, you won't believe what happened to me at band camp. And they think that's going to be, and so it's sort of the opposite of what you're talking about. But it's the same problem. Who is this movie for? A new writer doesn't spend enough time just for a second thinking, who is this movie actually for? Who is going to pay money to actually see this movie? Because it just trickles down. That producer is going to look at it and say, well, who am I going to be able to get to raise money?
You have to think of the budget. You have to think of the genre. You have to think of these things. If it's a stunt script, it's a stunt script, and it could be a great sample. We've been going for an hour and a half.
Yeah. So your guys it's like Joe Rogan for screenwriting. Yeah. It's just a conversation.
That's our show, Joe Rogan for screenwriting.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's lots of things we'll want to say a second year off. Maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah, for sure. I'm totally game.
All right. So we really appreciate the time you spent and how transparent you've been about your contests and your services. And it's so awesome, all the free resources, because it's very generous, and it's a good spirit to give away stuff, because you want to help people. And
absolutely. And I do a weekly podcast. Anybody can check out that, sellingyourscreenplay.com. I do a weekly podcast with a filmmaker, typically someone who's doing kind of a low budget movie, less than $1 million. So please do check that out. Obviously that's totally free. And do check out my movie too, The Rideshare Killer. I'll plug that. It's available on Tubi. So you don't need a membership or anything. Tubi TV. They show ads. That's how we make our money, but it's on Amazon Prime and those sorts of the iTunes and that sort of stuff. But yeah, definitely check all that stuff out as well.
All right.
So Charlie, it was very nice meeting you. I appreciate you guys having me on. Lucas, nice to finally meet you. And
nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to do our show.
No, thank you. Yeah, this was fun. Yeah, it was.
All right. Well, good. Well, there you go, audience. Another episode with us, and thank you to our guests.
Perfect.
Thank you to Charlie, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. We'll talk to you guys later.
All right.
See ya.